A two-screen handheld gaming console may seem super niche to you, but I think it may be a device that nudges this emulation hobby one more step into the mainstream. And with that, I fear that newcomers or people unfamiliar with the shortcomings of emulation will miss the point of this device entirely. Sure, having two screens introduces some new problems into the situation, like potentially more input lag, and emulators that now suddenly need to figure out how to send two screen outputs to two different screens, along with the limitations of Android for multi-display management. But you need to understand a little bit about what this device is cloning, and you need to understand how far these little handheld emulators have come. Firstly, the DS and 3D devices from Nintendo. These are iconic handheld gaming consoles that some people in my life have never heard of. That spans almost 2 decades, from the DS that resurrected the nostalgia of the old Game & Watch two-screen devices, and the range of 3DS handhelds that touted a revolutionary 3D display that did not require glasses. That is something, arguably, that has never successfully been done commercially ever again. Now, emulation started with things like Raspberry Pi computers that you had to build and set up yourself from hardware all the way to software. While this was fun for nerds, it was not really something that took off with a broader emulation enthusiast audience. Even the software like RetroArch, although very powerful and incredible in its own right, it wasn't until a few brave businesses started integrating this into mostly small Linux-based computers like the GP32 or Game Park 32. And with it launched the whole custom firmware thing that we enjoy today in this little hobby. It wasn't long before developers got very excited and started developing custom bits of software to run various things. My entry was relatively late in the game when I was trying to layer OpenDingix on my 350M with Simple Menu to create my own front end integrated with RetroArch, when Eduardo Filo beat me to finishing my personal product with a public release of Atom Image. That was one of the first unified systems for emulation in a handheld gaming console. Fast forward to today, where Android is the dominating system on higher end emulators, and it's been a very rapid succession from a rugged Android build on something like the RG353P to AYN's relatively neat release of Android on this new two-screen Thor. Along with ready-to-use custom emulators from independent developers for two-screen handhelds that are ready to use at the time of shipping. This has literally never happened before in the history of this retro emulation scene, that the company made something, the community jumped on it, and the product arrives and everything just works straight out the box. And we'll get into that a little bit later in the video. At least I can't think of any launch in the history of doing this in the last sort of 4 years where a launch has been this seamless. So here we are with the Thor, a dual screen handheld with a tried and trusted chipset that is very robust in emulating everything up to Switch, which is everything. Like that is all the retro games, like up to Switch. There are no other games. It has a decent Android build, exceptionally high quality hardware, 2 OLED screens, and emulators that are in the best shape they've ever been since this whole thing started, including Switch emulation. That Eden emulator, the irony is that Switch emulation has never been this advanced, and we have the shutdown of Yuzu to thank for that. So, you know, this thing is, for all intents and purposes, perfect, barring a few flaws. And that's how we got here. That's how we got to one of the most perfect Android emulation handheld launches of all time, with a few flaws, and we'll talk about that. And top of my list of things to talk about is it's a whole new way to interact with a device, and that can be a bit of a pain for some people. There is input lag, and we'll talk about this because it's interesting. Hinge concerns, we will talk about this Hinge in a fair amount of depth, and weird screen issues. So let's jump straight into it, and we'll start from the bottom of that list. We'll start with screen. The overwhelming positive is that we have 2 stunning OLED screens here. I did pick up on a 118 Hz reading for the top screen, which may be a concern, but the PWM test does seem to be good for those who are sensitive to that. And PWN stands for, obviously, pregnant with monkeys. So if you are sort of sensitive to people who are pregnant with monkeys, then, just be aware that this does have a little bit of PWM. So if you are pregnant with a monkey, that also, maybe then you'd feel a kindred spirit with this, or maybe if you have had bad experiences with somebody who has been pregnant with a monkey, then maybe don't buy this handheld. I was struck by how crisp this 6-inch 1080p OLED screen is. It's just proof that 6 inches really is an impressive size. It'll be perfect for game streaming with something like Moonlight from your PC. You can even play around with increasing the frame rate if you like that sort of thing. The bottom screen excites me. With this 1.15:1 aspect ratio, it's a near square, which makes it great for Game Boy and Pico 8 emulation. I realize you effectively have Retroid Pocket 5 at the top and Retroid Pocket Mini at the bottom. So you've got like retro gaming like Game Boy at the bottom, and 16:9 content at the top, whether you want to stream or watch a movie. It's kind of cool. Now, the weird thing about this screen is that there's a pretty strong current of comments on my Twitter post about how there's not a 3D screen like the 3DS. And my answer to that is no. No, there isn't. But there is a Snapdragon chipset, 2 OLED screens, the ability to stream games, play Android games, play every retro game in history. But no, there is no 3D effect. But the real screen issue, as opposed to crazy internet hysteria problems, is the 120 Hz discrepancy. The bottom screen is not a 120 Hz screen, so when you turn 120 Hz on for the top screen, you get this on the bottom screen. And while this may look like a superfluous thing, that effect, that screen tearing effect, has cropped up in many situations. And the more you get used to your 2-screen thing, you will want to use the bottom screen for multitasking, and you're not going to be able to do 120 Hz at the top if you want to do something constructive at the bottom. But again, first of its kind, best retro handheld release in retro handheld history. So we carry on. I need to talk about the Hinge because I kind of glossed over this in the Flip 2 review. I don't want to make the same mistake again because there were issues with that Hinge. I have been doing this. I haven't had this for a very long time, so time will tell. But I have done maybe 1,000 revolutions since I got it, and I'm not seeing any major wear. I am seeing a little bit of play on the ends here, but I think that was there from the start. So I need to mention this fact. The plastic on this handheld feels very similar to the Retroid Pocket Flip 2, and I have noticed the Hinge sprocket is only on one side, which I naively assumed was on both sides for the Retroid, which it isn't. My theory is that having that metal sprocket hinge guide thingy only on one side of the device is creating an uneven tension. I can't show on the screen the fact that I've just inspected it and I can see there's metal there and there's no metal there. And on the Retroid Pocket Flip, I haven't opened this one up yet, but on the Flip, there's just plastic going in as a guide. And what that in effect does, in my mind, is that you have varying tension. You have this sprocket creating the different stages of the hinge. So you've got the 1, 2, 3. So you have that, but it's only being created, like that tension is only being generated on that side, which means this side is left to just flop about willy-nilly. And that can be an issue. In my limited engineering mind, that is varied tension, and in my mind, that is what caused the plastic to crack. Now, this is a very similar plastic to that, and so time will tell, but I do have hinge concerns on this handheld. And like I said, I have been doing this over and over again, while I've been standing at my computer doing the script and what have you. So, we'll see, and I will keep you updated on my social medias. So I have been comparing it to this, the RG35XX SP from Anbernic, and this oh-so down and dirty cheap V90S from Powkiddy, and it's just objectively not as good a hinge as these two devices. And I mean, this is a cheap device, and so I do think Anbinix's upcoming device, their DS clone, is going to have a superior hinge. I just, history with these brands tells me that. So it's concerning. And Retroid have issued a statement they are not sister companies with AYN. I've had documentation that I've seen where Moorchip is affiliated with AYN. Maybe they don't own them, but they definitely are sharing technology and know-how. And so I am tentatively concerned about the hinge with this device. Not crazy. I think if you treat this with the love and care that an expensive device that starts at $250 deserves, I think you're going to be okay. Input lag. Okay, so here we'll get into a bit more gaming demos and talk about the input lag. I noticed when this first arrived that I was smashing on the buttons, and so I was convinced that the input lag is really, really bad on here. Retro Game Core has done a bunch of testing compared to original hardware, but we already know that original hardware doesn't have the same input lag that these emulators have. Your brain over time gets used to it. I know with my 350M, people were like, what about input lag? And I was like, what input lag? And then they were like, the input lag. And I was like, what input? And so we just went on and on. And it was just because my brain had gotten used to the input lag and I didn't notice it at all. So I think we do definitely have a lag to the top screen. My verdict is because I did a little bit of testing here in the studio and I compared this to the RG477M, which in my opinion is one of the best retro gaming emulators around. I don't feel input lag on that thing. It definitely does have input lag, but I just don't feel it. This thing is running faster than that. So whatever is going on, I think the whole input lag fiasco has gotten completely out of hand online. Retro Game Core was just trying to give his inputs in that regard, and I think Reddit took it to a whole nother level. Okay, so let's talk about the hardware. The triggers aren't too bad, says Bob Wolf. I hate them. I really do. They are almost identical to the Retroid Pocket Flip 2, and I didn't like these. I just think it's a missed opportunity because this is a great streaming handheld and it's got these sharp corners on it. It just doesn't wrap around, and so it doesn't feel nice when you are playing modern games. The action buttons, on the other hand, are excellent. They're some of the best action buttons out there. They're not as clackety as AYN devices in the past. My Portal has got terribly clackety buttons. These are lovely, firm rubber membrane action buttons, slightly recessed for the flipness of it, and I really like them. They've also added these neat rubber bumpers at the bottom here for the screen. So I actually want to make you all nervous and grab my knife and see how deep the rabbit hole goes. How deep are these rubbers actually into the plastic? That's great. I think there's a little bit of, not sure if there was even a bit of glue there. That is a nice big long rubber that goes into a deep hole. It provides ample protection, and I don't think they're going to fall out very easily. So that is a good hardware thing. And they sent a grip which is actually one of the better grips out there. I can't find the stickers that they sent me, but they sent little M3 stickers so you can kind of use them as you please and get them secure in here. They've actually made a hole here for the lanyard so that if you have a lanyard that's going to fit through that hole, you can actually fit it, pull it through the hole, and still have your lanyard while the grip is on. So what you'll see is that the grip kind of lips over here, and when the lid is closed, you'll see that there is a gap here, and that gap has now been utilized for the grip, and so it wraps around. So it fits really nicely into it. And I must say, I'm not a grip kind of a guy, and this grip works really well with this device. I won't be using it, but it does work well. Because I mean, the buttons are, let's face it, cramped on the side here because of the screen. So the grip just gives you a little bit more leverage on your thumbs, and it does feel great here. So if you are a grip person, go for it. And then a cool little feature with an update came the fact that you can set different colors to your joysticks, the RGB, and if you really want to, which I haven't done, you can set different backdrops to your home screens. Okay, let's use Seth to test the audio. You ready, Seth?
Oh, do we have to? You f***ing retarded ass f***er.
Okay, so we're using Seth to test the audio. And now for the last point, how I interact with the Thor. The user experience is not seamless and takes a while to get used to, but once you understand what AYN did, it makes a whole lot of sense. Firstly, tap the screen you want to use. Now you can start moving around in that screen. Now you tap this screen, and now suddenly the controls work on this screen. And then secondly, multitasking is at the top. So if you swipe from the bottom here, you're not going to get any multitasking. So if you want to close apps, you do it here. And thirdly, to move an app. So let's say we were watching our supernatural thingies here, but then we realize this is a square screen and it's too small. Then all you do is you tap on the same app over there and it moves over to the screen, so you can just switch between screens like that. And lastly, in AYN have implemented these screens, which don't do a hell of a lot, but you do get a little multitasking button, which I don't actually see the points of. On this screen, you get quite a bit. You can switch the top screen back to 60 frames per second. You can do a few little things over here, like change your controller style, switch the performance mode, and then keep an eye on your stats. What I have noted here is the GPU and CPU seem to adjust to whatever performance mode you're on. So I think it's telling you what it's running that GPU and CPU at for performance, not what it's actually doing in real time. And then it's quite nice, you can switch screens on and off here. So bottom screen only, and then you can switch the brightness of both screens simultaneously, or you can do it independently, and you can do the volume for each screen independently. So that's quite nice if you have headphones on and you want to listen to the movie and you don't want to hear the game audio or whatever. And then once you get that, the rest is up to you. I actually found the Odin launcher to be a nice simple way to get things up and running. And then I use ESDE Emulation Station for my low-end games. So I will go to the bottom here, I'll open Emulation Station, and then I'll browse for a Game Boy game or an NES game. And then do things like watch Supernatural at the top and play Batman the video game at the bottom. This way, my ADHD brain never gets to rest, and I will remain in a state of fear that I will never lose this anxiety and despair in my soul. Just kidding. I know that I will always be in a constant state of despair. I may create a short video next week of how I very simply set this all up for a sort of quick start guide. And while we're at it, please click on the AYN affiliate link at the bottom. That way, even if you buy something else from AYN, I'll get a little something on the side. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.